It's nearly the end of 2024, and games where we can see every pore on a character's face has become the norm now. Along with the advancement of realistic graphics came games with intricate gameplay systems and an expectation that games with these standards would rise to be some of the most anticipated titles to release. But amongst these behemoth games are titles that take on the challenge to stand the test of time in terms of gaming expectations. Titles that remind us what the first 3D polygon games were like and the whimsical nature of being immersed in a cartoonish world, and the gameplay is as simple as run, punch, and jump. These games have us asking whether it's time to revisit our roots and whether what was considered the future of gaming is maybe the past. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Anna and I'm a variety gamer who's been playing games for well over 20 years. I also work in the gaming industry. It's my first time doing a video like this, but I wanted to do something that's a little bit more podcasty, a little bit more casual. My last two videos were very serious, very scripted, and honestly take a long time to edit, so I just wanted to do something that was a little bit more loose, and I just wanted to talk about some games that I've recently beaten. So I don't know if it's like this for you guys, but for me, this fall has been absolutely insane for gaming, especially in the month of September specifically. In the summer, I was pretty much not playing anything new. I am not an Elden Ring gamer, so the DLC was not something I played. So I was playing old games and I was frankly just really bored. And right when September hit is when the schedule of game releases just became insane for me. I've never had a season where I was playing a new game back to back to back, where a game was releasing literally every single week until pretty much now. As a content creator who makes variety gaming content, it was a lot to keep up with. And so for this video, I wanted to talk about some of the games I recently beat in this season and some of my thoughts on them. And I also want to talk a little bit more broadly on how they changed my perspective a little on gaming as a whole, what we're trending towards, and what they made me appreciate after beating them. I will be showing some gameplay clips in this video, so just as a warning, spoilers up ahead. Okay, so the first game I want to talk about is Astrobot. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with what Astrobot is like, but it's basically a 3D platformer. Think of like Mario Odyssey or the older Major Mario games. And in this game particularly, your goal is to save a bunch of bots that have been lost to space and bring them home. The gameplay is relatively simple. It's mostly a run, punch, and jump kind of game, and you also get some special power-ups on certain stages. So I actually wasn't planning to play this game at all until near its release, and that's because I thought it was going to be like Space Jam 2, but as a video game. If you haven't seen Space Jam 2, it's basically like a huge advertisement for all the Warner Bros. Movies, and because of that, I thought it was going to be too much of a sellout-y game. But basically the week of, Sony contacted me, and full disclosure, they sent me a free copy of the game. And of course, I saw so many people start talking about it, so I was like, okay, I guess I need to play this game. And people who know me know that I really love this game. I've talked about it on my TikTok and my Instagram about how it might be a Game of the Year contender for me. I posted a more brief summary of my review of this game on those other platforms, but to summarize, it was just one of those games that was just like purely fun, and I love the creativity of this game. I thought all the stages felt so unique and so visually appealing. Of course, it's very, very cute. I thought all the mannerisms of the bots and even the enemies and everything about it was just very adorable. But it's also not just cute, it's also very clever and creative in the way that the platforming works with the integration into the stage design. Unexpectedly cinematic, especially during the boss fights. I was really going like, whoa, every time there was like a cool phase of a boss fight. There was good progression in difficulty, especially the challenge levels. And of course, a big appeal of the game in general were the Easter eggs and discovering all the little things that referenced other games. For anybody who grew up with PlayStation consoles, I'm sure they felt like some part of their inner child was being healed playing this game, and that absolutely was the case for me. I love being able to actually get some of these references and have this nostalgia for these games that I thought would never be referenced in a modern Sony game again. So as I usually do, I post highlight videos of everything that I pretty much play. So I did this for Astrobot, and I did not expect for one of these videos in particular to go nuclear. Yeah, this video got 3.9 million views on Instagram and 2.3 million views on TikTok, over 2.4 thousand comments on TikTok, TikTok and over 600 comments on Instagram. This one video I posted from the game was basically the stage where Astrobot turns into like a mouse, and that's like the power up. And that stage in particular was where I was like, oh, this game is really cool. And it was that stage in particular that made me want to go to my friends and be like, dude, you have to play this game. So in that moment, I was really excited that I played the stage and that I played it. So I wanted to post a highlight video of the stage immediately. When I was posting that video, I wasn't really thinking about anything except that I was excited for showing this off because I just thought this stage was super cool and fun. So in the video, I caption it like Astrobot's creativity is unmatched. And when I posted this, I wasn't thinking that hard on the fact that I used the word unmatched. Little did I know that this was going to ignite a war in the comments. It started basically a whole discourse on Astrobot versus Mario platformers, Nintendo platformers, other games like Little Big Planet. But yeah, it was not my intention to basically turn this into like a console war debate just because I said that this was unmatched. Definitely wasn't thinking that that word was going to draw so many comparisons. And I also got a lot of comments saying stuff like she's never played a Mario game, a Zelda game, and I just like don't really understand why me being excited for an Astrobot game led to that. It was just like a little ridiculous for me to see some of these comments. I mean, a lot of the comments were positive though. It was saying stuff like, so refreshing to see a game that is made to have fun. It's a joy to play. I haven't stopped smiling. Can't remember the last time I experienced that in a game. And then I just got comments like, yeah, bro hasn't played a Mario game. Wait till she finds out about Mario, Zelda, Kirby, Super Mario Odyssey over Astrobot. So if you guys wanted the secret to a viral video, this is basically the recipe. You get people to participate in an endless debate for infinite engagement in the comments. But yeah, I felt like it caused so much conversation in the comments that I actually posted a follow-up video about how I like this game more than Odyssey. That's a completely different topic that you can go watch the video on. All of that is to say, this game brought about a lot of unexpected and interesting discussion to the gaming community that I was surprised by. I think the first most obvious one is the long-standing popularity of 3D platformers and Sony's ability to basically compete with Nintendo because they own that genre pretty much. It's been a while since I've seen people so excited for a 3D platformer where the gameplay is so simple like this. And yeah, when I think about like a Sony game, these days I think about like games that have like insane graphics, or The Last of Us, or God of War, modern Final Fantasy games, versus when we think about Nintendo games, it's obviously like Mario platformers, Zelda games, Pokemon games. It's also interesting to think about because Sony was actually known for like its cartoony looking games like Spyro and Crash in the beginning, and that's obviously because like these realistic looking games didn't exist back then, and then they hard pivoted to that, and now they're kind of revisiting it. And it's really interesting to see how Sony has decided to go this route of like going against its own image but also competing against something that Nintendo has historically really owned. For a lot of the community, it was quite the whiplash to see Concord shut down pretty much the same week as Astrobot's huge success. Astrobot was developed by Team Asobi that is made up of around like 65 people. Meanwhile, Concord took about 8 years to develop and around like $200 million to make. And it's really sad to see that they actually recently shut down that studio completely. But yeah, seeing that happen both in the same week pretty much made it impossible for community members not to compare the two, of like this whimsical looking 3D platformer made by a small studio do so much better than like this huge investment that was made into this shooter game. Of course, there was a lot of discourse over the reviews of this game and comparing it against the other games, other big titles that released this year. I saw mostly conversations around Black Myth Wukong and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth being compared against it. Astrobot has a Metacritic score of 94 and Wukong has an 81 and Rebirth has a 92. So yes, on paper it is higher ranking than those other games that are much larger in scale, and I've seen people get kind of upset when this happens. They see like basically a baby game do better than their more serious games. To me, it kind of just proved that like a simple game in terms of gameplay doesn't have to be worse than something with complex gameplay, worse than the game that is like super realistic. So I can't say much about Wukong because I decided not to play that game. But for Rebirth, yes, I would actually rank this higher than Rebirth. I had more fun with it, and that's really just it. I could go more in depth with why, but at the core of it, I think I just had more fun with Astrobot. Speaking of the whole like realistic games against this like more cartoony, stylish looking game, this one video I found on TikTok, basically the caption is, "Broke, we need next gen for ultra realistic graphics. Woke, we need next gen to display thousands of physics objects at once." And it's basically the clip of that one Astrobot stage where after you beat the boss, hundreds of apples fall from the sky. And they also show off the other stages where you can just see a million particles on the screen of like thousands of gems falling down a hill, a bunch of sprinkles on the ice cream stage. And there were a lot of interesting comments here, like this one that says, "I need games to stop trying to be realistic. It was impressive when the technology was new, but now I'm sick of every world looking like the real world. I want fun, creative, and stylistic worlds. IMO graphics stopped meaningfully improving a few years ago. Now all developers want is their games to look more realistic, meaning decreased saturation and adding fog to everything. Unpopular opinion, but realistic graphics are overrated. A video game should look like a video game. It's more fun having a vibe and atmosphere than just realism." So yeah, I didn't really expect for Astrobot to be the one to bring this conversation and narrative back, where people are just kind of sick of realistic games, and that's like the sauce of the game, I guess. People obviously really loved how Astrobot was just pure fun, and it didn't focus on realism, but it still took advantage of like next gen graphics and the hardware system of the PlayStation to show off that it could be a buttery smooth game and still look amazing. My takeaway on this game and all the conversations that it came with was that what seemed like a pretty innocent 3D platformer to me sparked a lot of narratives on the impact games have on the industry. This was a AAA game that broke expectations in terms of how it was developed and how it could be a Game of the Year contender. And this game reminded me that it really just boils down to how much joy and fun a video game can bring me. A game doesn't have to look or play complicated to be good, and a game appropriate for kids to also play can absolutely be Game of the Year worthy. So the next two games I beat, I actually want to talk about in tandem because I feel like they are two games that are on opposite sides of the same coin. And those two games are The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom and The Plucky Squire. So the reason why I gave that coin analogy is because I feel like they are very similar. They have a very similar aesthetic. They have simple yet creative gameplay. And I would say they have pretty much the same target audience. And after beating both games, I really tried to understand why one game worked out for me and the other just didn't. So the reason why I actually discovered The Plucky Squire was because of this person named James Turner, who is the co-director of The Plucky Squire and co-founder of All Possible Futures. They previously were a Pokemon designer and art director for Pokemon. I remember I followed James for a while now on Twitter, just because I saw the art that they would post and I was like, oh, this is really cute. So I followed them, and then I eventually saw that they were releasing a game. So I saw that they left Pokemon and they decided to open up an indie studio and produce this game, The Plucky Squire. And I was like, oh, I followed this person for quite a while and I really like their art. So I can see that this game might be promising, you know, having that experience of working at Pokemon and Nintendo. This game got picked up by Devolver Digital as the publisher, and Devolver Digital has that reputation of pretty insane marketing, I would say. All of their games that have marketing backing have like really creative campaigns. You know, the Plucky Squire trailers were both in Sony and Nintendo presentations where it got a decent number of views. And the launch trailer for this is really cool. It was like a paper replica of the map in the game, and I was like, dude, this is really cool. So yeah, that's just the Devolver Digital publishing marketing at play. And as someone who just works in indie games, I know that Devolver Digital is just one of those publishers that people are constantly looking at because they just have really interesting marketing and are one of the more bigger publishers that aren't like the major AAA studios. Interestingly enough, I thought that the marketing for The Plucky Squire was better than Echoes of Wisdom. I think that Nintendo does a lot of like copy paste campaigns for their games recently. Like, they're not doing anything super revolutionary. They weren't trying to do anything crazy with it. It was just what they usually do. So anyways, because of the marketing behind both games, I was really looking forward to playing The Plucky Squire. You know, I was looking forward to playing Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I knew it was going to be a pretty good game, just knowing Nintendo and playing their games for so long. But I would say I was more intrigued with The Plucky Squire because they were new. And I did eventually post a review of The Plucky Squire on my platforms, but this is the game that fell pretty flat for me. And despite this game having a really cool concept of, you know, switching between 2D and 3D from like storybook to out of the storybook. It just wasn't executed as well as I thought it would be. There were definitely some highlights though, like I thought the aesthetic was beautiful, and there were some parts of the game where I was like, wow, this looks amazing. Like this part is really creative, and some of the mini games were honestly really cool to see. The puzzles were creative, even though maybe the steps to get there could be a little bit tedious. But yeah, overall, I just couldn't really find it in me to recommend this game when I posted that review because it just fell flat for me. I think a big part of what I also didn't like about the Plucky Squire was that it was very catered towards kids, and to me there's a huge difference between a game that caters mostly to children and a game that caters mostly to children but can also be fun for adults and anyone honestly to play. Very handholdy. They pretty much gave you hints at every part of the game. On the other hand, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, I really like this game. With this game, they are continuously proving that they are at the top when it comes to taking simple concepts and making it creative and having potential to grow throughout the game. And it's simple enough that a kid can understand it, but can also make anyone who plays it feel smart playing it. But they're definitely doing what they just usually do, making a game that fits their aesthetic and proving that sticking to that mold works. They're not really doing anything revolutionary by making this game, but I think that they mostly made this game to appease long-running Zelda fans. They definitely need to improve their hardware when it comes to even like simpler games like this. The FPS drops were very noticeable and suck. Maybe they're so obsessed with being apart from Sony that even applies to having bad hardware. But anyways, I can see this game being nominated for probably the family category, but not Game of the Year. Going back to the Plucky Squire, I don't want it to seem like I'm dunking on an indie game while uplifting this AAA game that had a lot of backing. I'm just trying to be honest in how these games played out for me, and I was trying to really understand why there was such a palpable difference in the enjoyment of this game versus a similar game like Zelda. It reminded me that the aesthetics of a game aren't enough for me personally to make the game good. It doesn't matter if the idea was good if it was executed badly. And I really wanted to love it because on paper, the formula looked like it was set up for success, but I can't deny at the end of the day, 99% of the games I play, the gameplay and how much fun it just is more important to me than anything. I honestly thought it could be an indie game that could go up against major publishers that have similar looking, like, you know, cute, stylish looking games. But it more so proved to me why that is so hard to do. And I don't mean easier as in accessibility. Like, yes, I'm sure it takes less resources to make a cartoony looking game compared to a game that has like realistic looking characters. But I'm saying there's still a challenge on making a game fun regardless of that. Ultimately, I think it's a great thing that this game was still made. I think it's cool that this indie studio took inspiration from something like Zelda and tried to make their own version of it. And they were honestly really brave because they had a pretty crummy release schedule, you know, releasing right after Astrobot and then releasing right before a Zelda game that looked really similar. I believe in the potential of this studio if they learn from the mistakes of the first game. So anyways, at the start of this video, I mentioned whether these stylistic games released this year could compete against the insanely popular realistic looking games today. I don't think it'll ever be as simple as whether realistic looking games is better or not than a cute looking game. Is a complicated game, mechanics or strategy wise, better than a simple fun platformer? Could be yes or no. There's a lot of room for discussion on what makes a game fun, and that isn't contingent on how a game looks or is marketed. At the core of it, I personally don't prefer one over the other, and I think the conversation becomes more nuanced and complex than we think. But one thing that will remain simple for me, just as it always has been since I was a kid playing video games, is asking myself the one question: was the game fun? That's it for this video. Sorry if I rambled quite a bit. Like I said, this is my first time doing a video like this, so I was a little bit nervous and I'm not super used to talking to the camera long form, unscripted. This topic is obviously much bigger and goes beyond the games that I talked about today. So I would love to hear in the comments what everyone thinks about this. Are you someone who enjoys realistic games and marvels at that part of modern video games? Or are you someone who is gravitating more towards stylish games or cartoony or cute looking games? I would love to know, so please leave your comments below. So yeah, until the next video, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!